Welcome to Crew Call, the Below the Line podcast by, for, and about the crew. Today's guest is a casting director. Please welcome Stacey Tenenbaum. How you doing, Stacey?
Hi, I'm doing very well, thank you.
Great. Thank you so much for taking the time to answer some questions for us. So let's just start off from the very beginning. When did you get started in the business?
Well, I think early on, I knew that this was the area that I wanted to work in. I didn't know exactly what I wanted to do, but I always was drawn to film and television. I watched a ton, and it was always something I knew that I loved. And when we were kids, my brother and sister and I used to do some acting, and nothing really professional, but just that's what we did, and that was what was out there. And we go on auditions, and one day I went with my sister to an audition. I was 17, and asked, "Hey, can I do a casting apprenticeship here?" So that's really what I did. It just was one of those things that I didn't even think I wanted to work in casting, but it was, I guess, the closest thing that I had to actual industry.
Wow. So you were able to get a job through that just by asking them, or?
Yeah. I mean, I'd go a few days a week and just work there. And after school, or I guess my classes, I had half days or whatever it was, and I would go for part of the day and just help out.
So you didn't work in any other departments, did you? You just went straight into the casting.
No, actually, I worked in a lot of other departments before I got to casting, or sort of the first department was casting, and then I found my way back there. So it was one of those things. I worked on films. I worked sort of wherever I could find something, and I was a costume designer and hair and makeup, and what else did I do? I mean, really just anything that I could to be near it. And when I was in school, I used to do extra work. I mean, it was just to be on set and to be learning and watching everything that was going on. And when I was on the development production side, I really was involved in every area.
Now, did you find any other department that you really, really liked other than casting, or?
Well, it's one of those things it's kind of funny that when you work in other departments, first of all, you get to know the bigger picture of everything. And I still love, one of the things that I do as well that I've gone back to is producing and writing and working with writers. And again, that's not the typical, casting path, but there isn't anything set in stone, because not a single person that I've ever worked with came from the same path. Everybody found casting in a different way. And that seems to be pretty typical, just because I don't even think there's a single program in school that teaches casting. And honestly, having gone through 2 film schools, it was one of those things you deal with, but nobody really addresses in the way that you would probably need to if you were looking to consider going into casting. There's a lot of people who were actors or who came from some sort of backwards way of getting to casting, but I don't know anybody who said right away, yeah, I've always wanted to be a casting director.
I would think for casting, you would kind of have to know what you're casting, in a sense.
Well, there's a certain affinity that you have to have in that area. And it's one of those things you can certainly learn it, but there's so much of it that is just, it's both intuitive, and first of all, you need an amazing memory. That you can learn how to train your memory, and it's a muscle, and you can make it stronger. But it's something you have to have the ability to do, to remember all these actors and then be able to know what to do with them. But having that kind of recall is something that I think most people, you're either born with it or you aren't. So some people would look at it and go, oh my God, that's just so daunting.
Okay. So speaking about learning how to do the job, why don't you take us from the beginning to the end of your day to kind of understand exactly what a casting director is going to do?
Well, I really think it depends on what the project is that you're working on. Because every project, there's a certain general day of any office where you get up. I mean, I don't know too many people who don't wake up and the first thing you do is you check your email and that you're doing all those things and checking your phone and checking voicemails in the office and doing all those things to sort of start your day before your day starts. And I think that goes across the board, but then depending on the type of project you're doing and where you are in that project, that sort of dictates what your day might look like. So, probably the most intense thing you could ever work on is a pilot. And pilots are, for anybody who doesn't know, it's the sort of the sample piece that you're doing of a television show before it gets picked up to air, and if it will at all. And usually pilots are done during pilot season, which means you're competing with several dozen more pilots from all different networks and the same network and all over the place. And so you're competing for a very small window of there's only a certain amount of people and everything is done within a very short window of time. And so pilots are the most intense version of casting you'll ever have. So your day starts immediately and it goes very long. And so the process will start on any project. The process will start with getting the material, getting the job, first of all, and then having concept calls with the producers and sometimes with the network or studio, whoever else it is, and figuring out, okay, where do you see certain characters? Where do you see certain roles going? What direction do you see for this role? And then coming up with ideas and lists. And usually you'll have to come up with those ideas before you've even had that conversation because you have to pitch yourself for the job. And that happens very often. Casting directors are hustling the same way actors are and everybody else. You're constantly trying to audition for the job. And so then once you're hired, then you can really get into it and figure out, okay, not just what you have ideas for it, but what their ideas are. And then you'll put out a breakdown, and that goes out to the agents and managers of all the roles, and they'll have a little description of what you're looking for, and then they'll submit people on those roles. So once you have that going, then it's a constant where you'll get tons of online submissions. I personally like to keep a paperless office, so I don't like having the hard copy submissions. I only like the electronic ones. And that's, I think, what a lot of people are using. Some still like both, but I prefer just the electronic ones. And you're going through submissions and you're fielding hundreds of calls and emails a day. And that is a pretty typical day. Now, if you're on a series, it's a little different because you have a different kind of time window. So a pilot will last for, I've done pilots that we had 2.5 weeks to cast it, and then I've done pilots where you have 3 or 4 months. And that's usually, 3.5, 4 months is pretty much as long as you'll ever get. And usually it is within pilot season, which makes it that much more challenging. Yeah. But that's for the general with when you're doing a pilot, and that's not even including the portion of the pilot where you're doing auditions and you're doing pre-reads and you're doing producer sessions and then you're doing testing at the studio and then you're testing at the network. And so you're going through all these different stages. And so every day, it's hard to say what an actual everyday looks like because an actual everyday is so dependent on what is going on, how quickly are you testing, how quickly are you getting the auditions. Usually when you start a pilot, it's ground running. It's, whether you have an office or not, you've got a phone and a computer and you're already setting up auditions. So hopefully you will have an office to have those auditions in. And so it's that quick. And that just, everything is always moving. And then everything is, once you get started, then it's a combination because you might be testing on one role, but you're still auditioning and doing pre-reads on another role and looking at submissions. And you also have to work on your lists, which are the lists that of everybody that you've seen, everybody you want to see who may or may not be available, who's not available. And those are the things that you're constantly having to submit to the studio and network and producers. That is sort of the most intense version of casting. And then when you look on the reverse side, when you have like a movie, and you have some movies, 7 months, 9 months, 10 months, a year. One movie that an office next to mine, they were working on a project for 2 years, casting the same project, and it was a big budget project, and one of the big tentpole movies, and they were working on it for about 2 years. That's the extreme where you have a lot of money and a lot of time. So your day is a little different. It'll sort of go through bursts of being busy, because if you have producers who are in town, or the directors who's in town who maybe doesn't live in LA, or you have to go on location or go to New York or go somewhere else to do sessions. So you have a little longer leeway to get that. So that's really the two extremes. And then if you're on a series, the week by week changes. The best schedule, you could choose any job, is a multicam sitcom, because those have such a specific schedule. Now, we as casting directors, like the casting department, are usually in the same zone as the writers, because as soon as they get an idea, when they have a script or an outline or something, they send it to us, because we have to get moving on finding those people. So the bigger the role is, if it's a big recurring or big guest star, or somebody that they want something special, then we'll probably get a lot of time ahead, a little heads up to start looking.
Is it different for you when you're casting lead people versus when you're casting day players or supporting roles?
There's a difference in the process too, because like I was telling you, with the testing, with all that stuff, there's so much scrutiny on those big roles that there's so many people who have to put their voices in. Now, for the day player role, those are the ones that are fun, because then you get to put in some of those fun actors that you've gotten to know in different venues that aren't famous, but are great actors, or have great faces, or good comedians, and there's somebody who's interesting to you, and somebody who you really want. And when you work on a series, usually there will be people you'll bring in again and again and again until you can actually cast them in something, because you're just dying to, because there's something special about them, and you really want it out there. And it's something that we work very hard for, when there are those people that we're like, no, we're going to save them for something better, or we're going to just keep bringing them in until they are a fit, until we can actually get them. And sometimes when the producers are only looking at our auditions, they're only looking at tapes. They're not in the office for some of those smaller roles, or even for some of the guest star roles, because once the production starts, a lot of times they are busy in production. So coming to every audition is not something that's on their priority list. And frankly, I prefer when they're not, just because we can work with the actors in a different way. We can give them different direction. We can show the better takes. We can do multiple takes if there's something where we're like, no, they're not getting it, but we know they can do it. And we'll work with them and sort of say, okay, this is, on the side, this is what we know that they're responding to, so do it like this. Or not so much do it like this, but this is the essence of what they're looking for.
So have you, since you've started out and since all this time, have you seen the industry change at all? Has anything become different from when you first started? Or is it pretty much the same thing for your department?
Well, I would say, technology has certainly made our lives so much easier. I was around long enough that, and also because I started when I was 17, but even in LA, it's a little different, because, when I started, we had stacks of headshots, like hundreds and hundreds of headshots, and they were all black and white, which now they're color again.
Oh,
so
yes.
it's just, you had like hundreds where you have to go through these piles, and it was just such a mess. And where it really, you had videotapes, and it's actually really funny, because we still say, the language of it will still say, oh, can you send me tape on somebody? We don't want an actual video cassette tape.
Right.
We want a link to a reel.
Yes.
And I don't even want a DVD anymore. I have a paperless office.
No, you just want a link.
I don't even have, when I don't need it, I don't use my printer, because what do I need the paper for?
Right.
So that has been a big difference. I would say when we used to put out breakdowns, we would have to fax. And even it's so funny because I was been working with a producer who I guess hasn't dealt with breakdowns in a while, and he's like, "Oh, can we get it out? I guess it's not going to go out until tomorrow or till the next day." And I said, "What are you talking about? I can put it out whenever. Like, I just need to wait till the guy at Breakdowns is there so he can put it online and make the changes that I want to make. But I don't have to wait for a particular time because he reminded me there was a time, and I remember this, but it was so long ago, where every morning the agencies used to get a physical copy of the breakdowns at like 6 o'clock in the morning. So you had specific time deadlines of when you had to get your stuff in by, because it was all physical. It was all like, and I would get in when I worked at an agency. I'd be the first one in the morning. I'd pick up the breakdowns from the mail, from the slot, and then go and make photocopies for all the different agents. And everything was so analog. And now all I have to do, I write the email, I send it to my guy at Breakdowns. I could do it myself if I wanted, but I prefer I don't want to wait around for some anonymous person online who's going to activate it. So I will email it to my person that I deal with, and then he will send me back for approval, and then I'll say, good, it's good to go. It'll be released within seconds. And I can receive submissions 24/7. There are often times where I will send things out at 2:30 in the morning, and they'll be like, why are you sending appointments out at 2:30 in the morning? I can send out appointments by email. It's called email. And because that's how my day is. Sometimes I don't have time to make all the calls, and I'll just get it done at 2 o'clock in the morning, and I can do that. And that is such a luxury to be able to have that we really didn't have back in the day. But we still, even though all these things have changed, I would say the amount of emails has definitely, you can't control your inbox. It's just, you get hundreds of emails a day. And I still spend hours on the phone because I like that. I think it's important to talk with the agents and managers and have those relationships and not just have everything by email, because it actually sometimes takes more time to do the email than it does to just tell somebody. And I think when you're talking about something as sensitive as, you're talking about another human being. So an actor is both the product and something that you're dealing in, but they're still a person. And so I never want to say to somebody, like over an email, like, oh no, they didn't they were horrible. I would never say that. So in a conversation, I can say, you know what, they really didn't nail it. It really wasn't right. This is what they did well. This is maybe where they could go. This is a direction they could go, or I could give them a direction, but they're not going to be right for this. But it comes a little differently than saying, nah, forget it. It's just, to me, it's a little too cold and impersonal, but I think typically there's the balance.
Yeah, you can get the right tone through emailing or texting. You have to, when you're talking to someone, it conveys the emotion and the tone of what you're trying to say.
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. I've gotten in trouble over the years with email too, because it's tone. It's not being dismissive. It's not, but sometimes people will read it a certain way. So I think it's just better when you talk to these people, and I know these people so well over all these years on the phone, and Facebook has been great for that, because then you can actually see them, because we work so many hours. It's very rare that we have the luxury to go out and have a lunch with somebody or go for drinks. So it's nice to be able to have those times, and when you are on downtimes, then you can meet up with people. But yeah, it is that you have these relationships, and that's what you bring in your ability to find actors and get people on board, and they trust you. And that's something that, the more independent projects I'm working on, where you have to convey and say, listen, I need to know what guarantees, because my name is going out there as well. And also where things have changed over the years is the studio projects, the bigger projects, when you have a lot more people involved in the process. Like back in the day, I feel like maybe it's also when you're on a long-running show and the producers have a certain amount of power with the network, that you don't need as many people getting approved. You know, you don't need as many people to approve, let's say, a one-line co-star. But I feel like progressively over the years, that has become a thing of getting where we didn't necessarily need approval on one-line co-stars, and now I would say almost always. I mean, it's very rare that they'll say no, but it's still something it needs to go through the channel to get approval. So that's something I feel like has definitely, and I think that's across the board. I don't think that's just in television casting. I don't think it's just in film. I think in every department now, so many more people become involved in the process. And that's something that's changed a little bit. There's very little, there are only a handful of people who really have that kind of power anymore, where there used to be a lot more. Like if you had a hit show and you were a hit maker for the network, you could pretty much call the shots. And that's getting harder and harder to find. Like there's less people, they're corporations now. You know, when you work ABC, you're part of Disney and Synergy and all that other stuff. These are huge, huge corporations, and that's something that has definitely changed over the years. But I don't think it's exclusive to casting. I really don't. I think it's everywhere. There's so many more voices in every sphere. So I can't say that the costume designer has as many people saying yes or no, but they still have to go through the channel.
So what would you suggest to someone? I know we talked a little bit about this in the beginning, as far as how you got started, but what would you say to someone who's just getting started and they want to do casting? What do they need to know, and who do they need to know?
Well, I would say, like I said, it's definitely, it's a competitive market, so the more you bring to the table, the better. If you're in school, intern. If you're not in school, it's going to be a little harder because you definitely are going to be missing something. If you are able to, if you're in a position where you can take a class in something that would give you the opportunity to do an internship for course credit, then do it. Because those are something that's something that you just, it's just, that's how it is now. You need to have that in-office experience, because the casting assistant is not an assistant. They're not somebody who's just answering phones and fetching coffee and worrying about their boss's schedule. So I would say, other than watching a ridiculous amount of TV and movies and old TV and movies and comedy shows and watching YouTube videos and going to plays, I would say also start making lists of actors you like. Like, start following people. Like, not literally following them, but like following their careers and figuring out, like, oh, I like so-and-so, and then trying to keep track of them, of what they're doing, and when you see them in something, and try to just be aware of a lot of actors that are out there. I would say, practice making lists. Like, if you read a script or if you see something, especially if you see, let's say you see a movie and you think, or a TV show and you think the role was poorly cast, come up with your own list of who you would cast instead. If you look at who are the TV actors out there and who, if you could have anybody, who would you have put in that place? Not anybody who is just out there, but anybody who actually could be castable, and just practice making those lists. Like, if you read a script, and read scripts, reading scripts is always useful. There are thousands of them on the internet, and you can pretty much get a script for anything. Try making lists of actors that you would put in those roles. So look at those things. I would say, cast student films, cast your friends' internet shorts. Do those things. Put yourself out there in that way and just get that experience, because you really will learn so much, especially on the smaller project, because the less money you have on anything, the harder it is to cast it.
So what is the best part of your job, and what's the worst?
Okay. So the best part of my job is when you get to cast somebody fresh, somebody, either a new find or somebody you've discovered a while ago but you haven't found the right role for, and that everybody can get excited about and inspired by. And that everybody is just, oh my God, this person is so amazing and they're so perfect. And then the writing changes because they're inspired by the performer. And that's always fun because oftentimes you get pushed to cast the same old faces. And when you get to find somebody that, and not necessarily who's new, but somebody who maybe you've seen in a few things, but they haven't really hit, and then you know how talented they are. And then when you're able to get, when somebody gets really, when the network president or somebody out there like, oh my God, we love this person, that's an amazing feeling. I would say the worst part is, having an actor pushed on you because they have a deal with the network or one of the producers has certain ideas about the actor or they want to take them to bed or whatever it is. And where you get somebody who's pushed and they're really not right for the role, or they're just not funny or not likable, and it's sort of soul crushing because you know how good it could be, and then the politics of it gets
in the way,
put in the way, and then you have somebody, and usually I will say that even when it doesn't go the direction you want it to go or you think it should go, a lot of times what will end up happening is that the writers will end up changing the role a little bit to fit the needs of that other person, the person that you did cast. And it's frustrating because you know how good the character was when you first read it, but in every day you have things that are frustrating, you have things that are great, and that's why you do it.
Okay, so our last question. If you were the queen of Hollywood, what would you do differently?
Well, I think if I were the queen of Hollywood, I would definitely do something to fix the system right now. I mean, movies and broadcast networks are broken, plain and simple. The tentpole movies, all these ridiculous movies that are just so extreme. I feel that there will definitely be a shift in the movie world because it has to. It's gotten to such an extreme that movies cost way too much money, and so they're only making the movies that make a lot of money because they are those. The movies cost so much, so they have to deal with them in that way. And those are not movies I have any interest in seeing, and they definitely are not movies that are actor-centric. They're more just show up, and if you're lucky, you get to act, and maybe if you're a guy, you get to act a little bit. If you're a white guy, maybe you get to act a little bit more. There isn't that much diversity, and there certainly isn't that much gender equality, but there's definitely some issues with that, and I think it will self-correct at some point, and more smaller movies will come up, and maybe we will get back to the balance of what movies used to look like and what they're still doing in the UK and doing in other places. So, and I really don't think it's the lack of talent. I really think there are so many talented writers and so many talented directors and so many talented actors. I mean, we happen to be in this incredible age of the internet where you can make your own low-budget projects and get them out there. And that's something that never existed before. And you don't have to, good quality stuff or interesting voices or fresh voices will find their way to the surface. People will find them. I don't have to go looking for it. It will find me. Because it's one of those things that we're all so desperate for those voices. And every now and then you'll get a way back. You'll get Jim Rash and Nat Faxon who will come out and do something. And they've been around in Groundlings. I've known who they are for a decade. They're super talented. And these are all those voices that are slowly coming to the surface. And I really feel like there's many more opportunities for that. I think it's just the studio system that's really broken. And to me, that's a big issue right now. And I think it influences everything else that we do. And then the other thing that I would do if I were Queen of Hollywood is that I'd also give casting directors the acknowledgement they deserve. There's just such a misconception about what we do, and usually it's the casting director who is the one who introduces. We are making the match. We are introducing the creative people, the directors and producers and studio people. We are making that introduction between the actors and those people. And I will say there are many times where they do acknowledge the casting director, and that's always, and by name, which is important. And that always feels so amazing. I mean, that is such an amazing feeling. And it's not because we do it for the credit at all. It's more, it's nice to be acknowledged for doing what you're doing. And I would recommend that everybody should find the documentary by Tom Donahue called Casting By, which is about Marion Doherty, but touches on some of those issues about casting directors. And it talks a lot about the casting director's position and why there's still no Oscar for casting directors, that there's no casting Oscar. It is the only position, crew position, like single card position, that is not given an Oscar.
Alrighty.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
All right.
Talk to you soon.
And I'll talk to you later.
Okay.
Bye.
Bye. And that's it for this week's Crew Call. Thanks again to Stacey for offering her in-depth knowledge of the casting process. Tune in next time for special effects technician Ken Petrie.